Hello everybody, I'm King Cat, and welcome back to my Devlog series for Voxel Odyssey. That's what I've decided to call this MMORPG, at least for now. Anyway, I've just finished setting up the SQL database I'm going to use for storing data, and subsequently the infrastructure for the game's authentication server. In today's video, however, I intend to write the basic rendering framework for rendering voxel meshes. So I have some basic code I've written for generating them programmatically here, and given a three-dimensional array of colors along with an origin, the code checks for faces exposed to the air, voxels with sides exposed to the air, and creates a unity mesh from them, and colors the vertices of each face according to the color array. And this works fine, but currently it only supports one submesh, which means that the mesh can only have one material. Since the alpha channel in the colors array isn't actually used for anything right now, the mesh can't really be transparent. I'm writing the alpha channel value to correspond to the material used. After I finish implementing this, I'm going to tidy up my code a bit, and then we'll move on to creating a voxel mesh editor. So, after minor modifications to the code, the voxel mesh class now supports multiple materials. As you can see here, I've generated 3 voxels programmatically, but only 2 are visible, 2 on the left. There's 1 on the bottom right, but it doesn't yet have a material. So let's quickly edit the mesh renderer here, and add a second one, and there we are. Our third voxel shows up. More importantly, we can apply our other materials to the mesh with different textures, colors, and lighting behaviors. I'm thinking I might even try some things with bump maps and that sort of thing. So we can change the material here to something else, and then the changes show up on our mesh. Very neat. So, after some careful thought, I've changed my mind about the way that I want to structure voxel meshes. To make it easiest on myself, I'm going to drop the color components of the voxel meshes altogether, and then assign materials that change the texture of each voxel mesh. So this way I can store simply a byte array of voxels instead of a color array, where each byte corresponds to a material. And this, however, presents another issue, though. How am I to texture the voxel meshes? Because after all, I want meshes that have variance in color, but each voxel needs to be a single color, and every side of the voxel needs to behave that way as well. So this means that I need to assign a color from a 2D texture to each voxel in 3D space. And I've considered multiple approaches to this, like blending a single texture based on XYZ components, but in the end I've decided it will be easier to generate 3D textures for each material. So I'm going to modify my voxel mesh classes to support this new system, and then generate some nice textures. So, as you can see, I now have a voxel mesh rendering with slight variance in color across its surface. This is actually done with a 3D noise texture that I've created, and my code essentially sets the UV coordinates of each voxel face to the corresponding pixel on the UV texture. So this way, assigning and managing materials and textures is really quite easy. Furthermore, if I edit this texture here by generating the noise differently, the changes appear on the mesh as well. Finally, the framework is set up, and I'm ready to create an in-game editor for voxel meshes. And I think I'll do that in a time-lapse. I've finished the very basics of the editor. Now all that remains is to add the GUI. I can edit the mesh pretty easily and multiple textures are supported. I did face one interesting issue in my coding just now though. On my voxel mesh objects in code, materials are stored as a string array, and when I load the mesh into Unity, I read each value from the array and then look up its corresponding material in a dictionary. However, to assign the material to the mesh renderer in Unity, I originally iterated over the mesh renderer's material array to assign each material. But it turns out that the way Unity has implemented the accessor for the mesh renderer material array is to make a copy of that list and then return that. So I was editing the copied array, which didn't actually have an effect on the original mesh renderer. So in the end, I had to create a new array and then assign the whole thing at once to get it to work. And this strange object-oriented paradigm detail is something that you see quite a bit in Unity, especially in classes like Particle System. I suppose it's probably due to the fact that much of Unity is a managed wrapper for C++, but it's still interesting to point out. Anyway, I'm going to add the GUI, and then we'll have a look at the finished product. I've just finished creating the GUI, and then I've built a basic sword using it. As you can tell by the reflections on the blade, it is using multiple materials for a better look, and I can easily assign those materials with the panel on the right. I can also edit the voxel mesh size and origin, as well as place, delete, and sample voxels, so I can click on a voxel and it will set the selected material to whatever material is on that voxel right now. Camera manipulation, I'd say, is fairly easier, and I can actually swap materials and their position in the materials array. I think this sword looks really nice, and I'm very proud of my work this episode. I apologize that it took so long for this video to be released. However, I have some standardized tests coming up, and I've been busy preparing for those, so wish me luck. I hope to get episode 3 out in the coming weeks. I anticipate I'll have a bit more free time then, and I'll be working on the basic authentication system and networking next. For now, please do leave a like and subscribe, and if you have anything to say, leave a comment. I'm more than happy to discuss various aspects of Unity and my project. Anyway, that's all for now. Have a wonderful day.